Crystal Ray saw every choice she had ever made with all the consequences of her choices, as well as all of her future parallel lifetime possibilities. She saw all this and more in her NDE. I would be so grateful if you could leave a comment in support of Crystal Ray sharing her story. And if you have had a profound spiritual experience that you would like to share on the show, you'll find the link to apply in the description box. Would you like to start by sharing your first NDE that you had when you were a child, or any relevant information leading up to that?
Okay, perfect. I'll start with my childhood. I had what I call a normal, dysfunctional American childhood. My mom was an alcoholic, unfortunately. My dad was mostly absent. So I had a really tumultuous childhood, and I was always a deep thinker. I was kind of an adult by the time I was 5. I mean, I really had to be the adult in the house. So, I mean, at a very young age, I was having very deep thoughts about life and death and the meaning of life and why did I exist. And so I think by the time I was 13 or between 11 and 13, when I had my first near death experience, I was already tired. I mean, truthfully, life was so heavy and so tiring. And I really had a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. And this one particular morning, when my mom woke up on the other side of a lot of alcohol, which means a big hangover, and she came thundering down the hall, and I remember just being like scared in my bed and like, because there were 3 of us at the time. We have another sibling now, but at the time there was 3 of us, and we never knew on those mornings who was in for it. But this particular morning, it was me. So she grabbed me by the hair and pulled me down the hallway and tossed me into the kitchen. And she pointed up on this grease spot on the ceiling. And I immediately knew what I had done wrong, which was I was supposed to, with all my other little girl chores, to have cleaned that grease spot. But I was so tired just of my life, and I hadn't had time to do it. But I think as most people who grew up with alcoholic parents, or in general who are around people who are drinking a lot and having hangovers, you don't really argue with the drunk. So I didn't defend myself. I just said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I jumped up on the counter. And I remember I was just so sad. Like it wasn't like poor pitiful Crystal sad, but it was like my soul was sad. And I was having this deep thoughts and conversation with this so-called God. And I remember thinking, and this is like really profound for me, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people, about the whole Christian view of God, which was, a punitive, angry, jealous God that was going to throw you into hell if you didn't, toe the line. And I remember I was really afraid of that particular God. And it didn't make sense to me, even at a very early age. And remember thinking, like, how could you create us flawed and imperfect and then punish us for being flawed and imperfect? It just didn't make sense what was going on. And so I I remember thinking about heaven and trying to be good to get to heaven. And I didn't like that idea because it sounded corrupt to me, like you're trying to be good to get something. So then I said, well, I also don't like the idea of trying to be good to avoid getting punished, which also felt like it was corrupt. And I remember thinking, and this is like the most beautiful thought I think I've had in my entire life. I just want to be good because I'm a good person. And it was like, oh, like, like that was my first real sense of self-worth. And I thought, that means I am a good person. And with that thought, I was rubbing the ceiling. I was on this counter. And I remember having this conversation with God. And I said, well, God, if you are real, I want to know that you're real, but not after I die, before, because I felt like that was cheating. And which seemed kind of impossible. But then the next thing I asked seemed even more impossible. I was like, well, and if you are God, you could certainly help my mom to stop drinking. But that seemed like a total impossibility. But with that, I turned around and I walked off this counter. And what happened next was very unexpected. So when you walk off a counter, the physics of it is that your head goes down, like you're kind of diving into a swimming pool. So in that moment, I was out of my body. I was immediately out of my body, and there was three of me. There was the soul entity that lived within this body. There was the body, and there was this omnipresent observer, which was also me. It's kind of hard to describe. And but what I related to was the entity or the soul essence that lived within the body above all. And I remember I was falling through this sort of, I guess, a tornado of time and space or a vortex of time and space. And or it was moving up or I was falling down, but I was in a fetus position and I was watching everything from a three-dimensional panoramic view. And there really wasn't any fear. I just didn't know what was happening. And suddenly I ended up in this serene velvet night that was speckled with stars. And there was this knowing and a voice, and I guess it's a voice, but really wasn't. It was just translated to me that this is time and space, and there's no empty space in the universe. And those sparkling lights are stars, and that's what you are. And then, boom, with that, I was back in my body. But the interesting thing is that, I fell off this counter. I fell headfirst into the floor and I landed on my feet. So I was like
Wow.
I was on my feet and I was like, okay, I must have hit the ground because you try to rationalize. I must have hit the ground and passed out, saw stars, had this really cool dream, and surely have like a bump or a scratch or something going on. So I ran to the bathroom, nothing. I was like looking around for something in my forehead. And then I started calling my brother and I was like, Mark, Mark, because we were really close, my brother and I. And he came in and he was like, what? And I said, God saved me. He was like, I said, yes, I fell off the counter. There was three of me and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, I think you need a straight jacket. Literally told me that.
Oh
And I was
no.
like, and we both just started laughing and ended on the floor. And I said, listen, I know this sounds so far fetched. It's hard for me to believe it and it happened to me. And I said, but please never forget that I told you this because I somehow the universe conveyed to me if I didn't have a witness that could acknowledge that this actually happened at this point in my life, I would probably think it's a dream because it was so many years ago. And so my brother is now a minister, a Christian minister, by the way. And, he's my, which is kind of hilarious because we have very different philosophical beliefs, but he's my witness to this event, which, like you, after this event, really transformed my life because I grew up in a house where I say God really wasn't welcome unless he was damned.
If you've been feeling disconnected from spirit, disconnected from divine love, I have an offering for you. I now offer one-on-one energy work sessions. It's my very favorite work that I've ever done. I completely rebalance your energy field and give you a transfusion of divine love and healing energy for any specific area of need, and follow it up with feedback on what I find in your energy field, a little bit of spiritual coaching, and simple takeaway practices that you can take into your life and implement to help you cultivate a deep connection with divine love. I offer 30-minute sessions, 45-minute sessions, and I'm currently offering 50% off on my 4-session package. Check the link in the description to sign up.
I grew up in a house where I say God really wasn't welcome unless he was damned. so,
Right.
so there was no, I mean, I'd heard the stories of Christianity and so I went on this big mission to find the truth, which I read the Bible 7 times as a very young person, like from the back to the
Wow.
front to the back. And of course, that scared me. I'm like, this is a very punitive, angry God that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I have a very good brain. I mean, at first I just thought, okay, this is a finite point in time. And these are very elevated thoughts for a young woman, a young child, really. We're like here for nothing in comparison to eternity. Wouldn't eternity weigh more against this finite point in time? Like, wouldn't that make sense mathematically? and other things like you're not supposed to be angry and you're supposed to be jealous. You're not supposed to, and yet that was what God was. And there was other things that it could go on and on. There's a lot of beauty and love in the Bible. I don't really like to slam religion because I went through my whole religious part of my life where what I found with religion is that most religions have some good and then some other things that you should just push aside. And what I found was the community was so healing. I was baptized, Melissa, 5 times because I didn't feel
Wow.
it. Because I wanted to feel it and I didn't want to lie, like you're risen again, you're saved. I'm like, nope, it's still me. And I had come out of this, like, falling out of my body and being in this presence. And I knew what it felt like to have unconditional love. And I didn't really feel that. And I didn't really want to lie. And then my life got very busy with my alcoholic parents, and I left home and I pushed the religion aside and I pushed all of my spiritual and just in survival mode, which my mom told me, you're going to be a prostitute and a whore and a drug addict. And I never want to see you again because I left home. I ran away at 17, which was the best speech she could have given me because it made me so mad. And I was like, I'll
Right.
show you. I made straight A's. I never have been a drinker. I never did drugs. I supported myself from a very young age. I went to school. I worked. I was very responsible. But again, there was not a lot of joy in my life. It was all just heaviness. And I remember one of the most heartbreaking things was my mom, when I called her when I ran away, and all I wanted was for her to say, come home. I love you. I'll miss you. We'll work this out. And she just said the opposite of that. And if you don't come home right now, I never want to see you again. You never existed. It was hard. So, but trucking along, I met my children's dad. I was modeling. I had several jobs. And I remember I was supposed to go, I was signed with an agency in New York, and I was supposed to go to Milan. But this handsome Mexican man asked me to get married, and I really wanted love. Like I always felt unworthy. I always felt unloved. I kind of had this Cinderella complex. I wanted a hero to save me, and he really fit the bill. He was, charming, and he came from a good family, and he was very smart. So I got married and moved to Mexico. And that was fun for about 13 years. But the problem with my marriage was not necessarily him. It's that I needed a hero. He needed to save somebody. But we, other than that, didn't have a lot of common values. Like I don't drink, he drinks. The culture in Mexico is very different than it is here, which I didn't know about. And so I was married, but I was super lonely. And so that ended after 13 years. And I came back to the United States with my 2 children. And I'm still really good friends with their dad because we are friends. It just wasn't a good union. And continued my life, but I didn't date for about a year and a half. And then I felt like this is not healthy. I'm a young woman. I didn't want to bring anyone into the house with the children, but I should go out. So I remember going on this trip with the first man who really, I said, I'm not really ready for a relationship. And he's like, I know, but why don't you come with me to Vail? You can bring a friend, a chaperone, and my kids are coming, which were grown kids, and we can go skiing and this and that. And this is what my second and really the most life changing near death experience that I've had. But I wanted to set into the context of my childhood experience so that you understand what happens next. So we're on this trip. It wasn't going well because I really wasn't
Oh
ready
no.
for a relationship. And I was just, his children didn't like me. I didn't really like his children. They drank a lot. They cussed and this and that. And they thought I was Little Miss Prissy, which I don't know. Maybe I am. I'm not sure. But they thought that about me. And I'm like, okay, it's not going well. And I told him, I said, I think I'm going to go back. Thank you for the invite, but I just don't think I was ready to date. And he was like, that's probably a good idea. And so me and my cousin, Carmen, who was my chaperone, we were there and I asked her to, I said, are you ready to go back? And she's like, yeah, she was the clarinetist for the Dallas Opera. And she's like, yeah, I can go back. I need to practice and this and that. And this was fun, but I'm ready to go. And I said, okay. So we're heading back to the airport and it's an icy road. And somehow, I guess he took a wrong turn. He should have been going down the mountain, but we were actually going up the mountain. And he started to slide. We started to spin. The car coming down the mountain couldn't stop, hit my side of the door at full impact at 50 miles an hour. And we went flying off this cliff, which turned out to be 80-foot cliff. But we hit at 25 feet, and then we flipped the rest of the way down
Oh,
10 times.
wow.
It was kind of one of those like things you see in the movies, where you see a
Yeah.
car like flying off a cliff and then it hits and then it tumbles, but that was like real life. But I remember in that moment, like when we started spinning, I remember time slowed down, almost non-existent. And I looked back at my cousin. She was so much fear and just I've never seen such fear. And she was hitting her head because we were in a little Jeep, hit her head here, and she hit her head here, and she was just like horror. And the guy driving was just like, and I mean, and because of my near-death experience as a child, I've never had a fear of death. So I was like just sitting there like, oh, I didn't know I was going to die today. I was, and feeling compassion for everyone else, but I wasn't really afraid. I was not the normal reaction. Let's put it that way. I actually softened into the moment. Like I got soft where everybody else contracted. I was like, oh, and then in that moment, I was outside of the Jeep watching myself from above, short distance above, in this omnipresence. Wasn't necessarily a being, but a presence that was enveloping me, a light, and I was comforted. I was completely held and comforted, and I was shown that everything happens as it should, and that all was well. I was shown my life in a 3D panoramic view, forward, backwards, up and down on the vertical and horizontal plane, meaning all the repercussions of every thought and action from the very first breath to this breath. And with no judgment, by the way, no condemnation, really more like compassion and support for my journey, even in those darker moments when I wasn't necessarily living up to my highest expression of self, when I was being cruel or unkind. And I was just shown how the perfection of imperfection, how everything was working for the good of my own soul and everybody else, that there was really no wrong choice for me. I was shown parallel timelines, meaning that I could, and this is true for all of our souls, like we live on a certain continuum, which is where our energy is currently, let's say, geared or navigating, but it's not completely set. That's why psychic readings and such are only good in that moment, because at any moment you can shift the compass and gently shift your timeline to a different timeline. And I was also shown that every outcome is already in completion, meaning that there's no possible outcome that hasn't already completed itself. What's happening is that we get to choose as a soul which one we want to experience. And with the shift of our energy, the smallest shift of our thoughts, and so many times people think it's these big like crossroads in our life that change everything. But what I was shown is like the smallest decisions that we make is what shifts the compass and leads us to different crossroads. So in other words, if you made these small decisions are what brings you to a certain crossroads, which wouldn't even be there if you didn't make this particular. So I was shown there's no judgment. We are unconditionally and absolutely loved. There is, however, a consequence to our action. And the consequence is simply the playing out of that energy. In other words, something is started into motion and it has like a wave. It's going to find its way to the seashore. It's going to complete itself. So that's not necessarily a judgment. It's what the soul longs for. The soul longs to have this feeling of completion and to know the consequences of its own actions. However, there is the grace factor, and the grace factor is this. Imagine you had a small child, and that child takes a bobby pin and sticks it in a light socket. And so he gets electrocuted, like a little buzz, not dying or anything. And so the mother comes behind him. She doesn't spank him on top of the electrocution, right? Like she's just like, oh my gosh. And so the grace factor is Now the child can have the bobby pin. He won't put it back in there because he learned the lesson. So what the grace factor is if you've learned the lesson, then it goes back into the universe. You don't have to have that completion, if that makes sense. So once the lesson has been learned, there's this grace that kind of like wipes away, if you will, the karmic effect of that action. But again, this is not a judgment of good or bad. It's just the soul wants this completion. However, that happens, whether it has to have the consequence of it or there's a grace factor, it doesn't really matter to the soul. The soul just wants the experience. One of the things I was told by this divine presence is that each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence. Let me say that again. Each soul, like every single soul, is here for the bliss, absolute bliss, which is the highest expression of joy of its own existence. Like we want to be ourselves, if that makes sense. We want to have our existence. And then he directed it, or this energy directed to me, and that means you. And I was kind of shocked by that because my life, and I think I told you earlier, Melissa, that had been so heavy. There wasn't a lot of joy. I was like good, the good girl. I wanted to be good. I always wanted to be good. But I was more like a heavy backpack. You know, like I would be a good daughter, a good mother, a good wife, a good ex-wife, a good friend, a good ex-friend. Like I was just good. But there was no joy in that. And so one of the things I was shown is that I had multiple opportunities at this moment in my life, this near death moment, one of which I could have just left the planet. And I was shown that, and I said, oh, no, 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 I can't leave the planet because I've got two small children and they need their mother. And in that moment, I was immediately shown the timelines available for my children where they would grow up without me and be happy without me. Like I've shown that they were at my funeral, that they were mourning the death of their mother, that they went through all, you know, all the suffering of not having a mother, but they found their way, went to college, got married, had their own children, and were happily ever after, which was kind of shocking for a young mother. Because as a young mother, you kind of believe that the destiny of your children is dependent upon you. When actuality, each soul has their own set of parameters. And if you were to leave or stay, that's all aligned with the soul that's come through your body. And I did not know that. So then what I was shown is that I get to be a mother. I get to carry the heavy load if I want to. It was a gift. I don't have to do anything. I could just leave. And I get to. I was shown that there was three things that were really important for my soul and that I was supposed to share. And they were kind of surprising. The first thing is that, and back to this idea of I get to, right? Like I was shown that I had never seen the sun rise or set. Now, I was 35 years old. Of course, I had seen the sun rise or set. But what I was shown is I had never really seen it. Like I had glazed over it. And I think this is the way that a lot of us live our lives. You know, if I ask somebody, like, how many trees are outside your house? Most people don't know. But you might ask a child and they might be able to tell you because they're more aware of like what's happening. So we kind of glaze over things that we already have a definition for. So I had never really seen the absolute beauty of the sun rising and setting. And I had never really acknowledged the metaphoric message of that, of like the beginning of a new day, the ending of a new day, the availability of another day of life. I heard a monk say recently, which was really profound and kind of fits right into this idea. He says, you have only one day in your entire life, and that's today. And I thought that was so beautiful. And that's kind of the message of like, you have this one sunrise. Like if you knew this was the last sunrise, this one day, how much more attention would you pay to it, to the rising and the setting? Second thing I was shown, it was very earthy, the smell of freshly cut grass, which still is just kind of bewildering to me, but everybody understands that. It was almost like the smell of grass, freshly cut grass, was that earthy smell of like the appreciation of Mother Earth, of Gaia, of like, you know, how everything that we are and everything that we eat and everything that is born onto this planet comes from Mother Earth. Like we are Mother Earth manifest into this physical being. We eat, we drink, we breathe Mother Earth. And so I was shown this I had never really acknowledged or seen or smelled or acknowledged the beauty of Mother Earth, like our planet. And then thirdly, and this most poignantly, I think for relationships, is that I was shown that I had never reached out and touched anyone. And of course, again, I have two children. I had reached out and touched somebody, and I was combing my kids' hair, and but like this idea of the truly connecting, like, so if you meet me in person, you're typically going to get a hug, because I really believe that we're in a sensory deprivation society where people don't connect. Some people, I own yoga studios, and some people don't get touched ever by anyone but me, because I'm touching their feet, I'm touching their shoulders, I'm adjusting their poses. Like, that's the only person touching them in the entire week or month or year. And they've done studies on this. Children who were given food, and I think it was after the Second World War, there was all their mothers were gone. There were all these abandoned children, and they were given food and bedding and all this stuff. But the nurses didn't have enough time to give the children affection, or to cradle them, or to hold them. And the children were dying. Not They had food, they had everything. They were just dying from a lack of human connection, a touch. And we're here, we have these physical bodies, and we're supposed to, and we get to, not that we're supposed to, we get to enjoy this type of connection, which we won't have once our bodies are gone. I'm sure it's a very nice connection, energetic connection, but it won't be this connection. And so I was shown the gift of having a physical body and being able to reach out and touch, and the gift of that. And then I remember thinking, well, all of that's very nice, but it's too late for me, because I remember I'm flying off a cliff, I'm flipping head over toe onto, the car is flipping. And I mean, I'm watching myself being thrown around in this car that's being demolished, that's going down the mountain. So I was like, but, it's too late for me, because I'm going to die. Like, I'm heading. And I remember thinking, my last thought was, before I guess I went unconscious, I was kind of excited to see the light. I was like, well, I guess I'm going back into the light. And the light, meaning the light I saw as a child, the speckled lights in the distance. And so I was kind of excited to go. Like, the opposite of what most people would be like, oh, I don't want to die. I was like, oh, well, I guess I get to go back to the light. There was sorrow about my life. And the sorrow was that I had this poor, pitiful me story going on, that I never saw the beauty of it and the gift of it. And so I never was really alive. I was just kind of survival mode for most of my life. And so that was the sorrow of my life. It wasn't really that I was dying. And I was kind of excited about going into the light. However, I woke up, when I opened my eyes, I was on the bottom of this cliff, 80-foot cliff. Our Jeep had slammed into a wall of ice. It was upside down. I remember seeing the wheels kind of turning, the lights flashing against the wall of ice. Everyone was silent in the car. The guy that was driving was kind of dazed out. I'm like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "I think so." And then I was like, Carmen, who was in the back seat, she didn't answer. And then I had this panic, like, oh my God, I'm alive. And I remember thinking, I get to, not that I have to, I get to hold my children. I get to see the sunrise. I get to breathe another day. I get to experience being alive. And one of the things I get to was, when I was in that out of body experience, I was shown different timelines. And what I didn't share with you is that one of the timelines was this exact timeline where we are right now, where I get to meet you, Melissa, and I get to come back and share this message and write a book and tell the world that, and I quote you, from this divine presence, love is all that matters. He, she, it wasn't really a sex, just said, you're going to write a book and tell the world that love is all that matters. And that made me excited. And in that book, you're going to share that each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence. And don't forget to include that sound and light are the future of medicine. Now, grant you, this is 35 years or 30 years ago. It was 1997, however many years ago that is. And so I was very excited about this. I was like, okay, I'll put in my book, Sound and Light. And I was really excited to write this book and tell the world that love is all that matters. And remember, this is from the girl who felt unlovable, because that's what happens to children in these dysfunctional families. You always feel like it's your fault. Like if you were a better child, your parents would be better. And then of course you usually marry somebody who doesn't see your value, who confirms that you're not valuable. So dysfunctional marriage. And then, so I kind of felt like I was an imposter. Like everybody thought I had this perfect life, but I really felt unworthy and unloved. And then all of a sudden, I'm supposed to write a book on love and tell the world that love is all that matters, which was part of my healing, actually, because the next 20 years would be dedicated of finding a way to write this book in the most authentic and true way possible for me. And so that means I had to really explore what love was. So, anyway, bottom of the cliff, I wake up, I realize I have another opportunity. I climb out the window. I'm climbing up this cliff. Luckily, I'm in good shape because it was like an 80-foot cliff. So, and it's freezing, and I don't like the cold, but we're in the middle of a blizzard. I climbed up this cliff. I make it to the top. There's a huge line of cars, at accidents. The car that hit us was still on the cliff up on the road. And people were like, do you know what happened down there? And I'm like, yes, there's 2 more people. You need to find them. And so that all the rescue people started heading down there. They pulled my cousin up on a stretcher. I think she was air flighted. But then it was really weird. And this is where it gets a little bit groovy because it was unexpected, at least. I started having psychic vision where I saw somebody with big plastic boots stealing my purse, which was freaking me out because I had my tickets, my wallet, my passage home was in that purse. And I kept telling somebody, please get my purse, please my purse. And I guess it was a fireman who stole my purse and my money and whatever, but they never recovered my purse. Then they took me in the ambulance to the hospital. And when I came in, there was this big commotion because Carmen had just been brought in on a stretcher. And one of the male nurses was very angry. And he was like, you guys are drinking and that's like manslaughter because your cousin is going to die. And I'm like, what? First of all, I don't drink. Secondly, my cousin is not going to die. So I went in to the room where they had Carmen on a gurney, kind of pushed my way in. And I put my hand on her and I literally must have felt like a bolt of energy go through the crown of my head and out my hands. And I saw her body kind of ripple. And I was like, oh, she's going to be okay. Like I saw that she was going to be fine and she wasn't going to die. And I knew 100%. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they pulled me out, that same nurse who says, you're not allowed to be in here. And when he did, I saw what he had been doing. Like I saw he was a very abusive man and he had been, I guess it was either his wife or his girlfriend that he hit her. And, he was a abusive guy. And I was like, I pulled away from him. It's almost like if someone touched me, I knew everything about them. I knew their thoughts, their feelings, their dark secrets, their secret joys. I knew everything. And I did not want to know, by the way. This was not like I didn't oh, I want to be psychic. No, this is just like instant download. And it was not like I knew one thing, then another thing, then another thing. It's like I knew everything all at once. Like almost like instantaneous download of every single detail of this person's life. But this person, particular man, was not a very nice person. So I ran into the bathroom and I was still in shock. Like I was shaking and I was cold and I was just afraid. I didn't know what was happening. Why was I having all this psychic things happening? I saw auras around people. I saw lights. I could feel all the emotions. So this really nice woman nurse came in and she was like, we need to take an x-ray of your neck. We need to get you out of the bathroom because I was in the corner. Like, I don't want to go anywhere. Stay away from me. So I said, I will come out as long as that male nurse is nowhere to be found. And so she said, okay. Then I had an x-ray of my neck, which they told me my neck was broken. And I was like, oh, no. I was like, that's not in my timeline. Because, I had seen my timeline.
Right.
So I'm like, no, I don't have a broken neck. And I put my hand on my neck like this. And I had that same bolt of lightning feeling. And my hand was hot on my neck and kind of stuck there. I said, you need to redo that x-ray. Second, third, and fourth x-ray, there was no break in my neck. And nobody could explain it. And so it's quite, and they said, well, we can't explain it, but we have this x-ray here. So if you want to leave, you have to sign your rights away. And I'm like, I'll sign. I want to go home. I want my children. I want out of here. So I signed that away. And longer story, but let's just fast forward to I come back to Dallas and I see my children. Oh, by the way, my children's dad. Here I'm on a trip for my first like trip with a man, and then I'm calling my ex-husband, please save me.
Oh,
Like, can you please help? I have no money. I have no, credit cards. Like, I have nothing because they stole my wallet. And anyway, very kind and very generous of him. He came to my rescue, and I came home. For about 2 weeks, I was in the dark. Like, I couldn't really be exposed to light. It was too hard on my eyes, and noise was really intense. And I saw these lights, and remember, I wasn't necessarily a groovy, like hang shingles and get your cards read kind of girl. I was just a very normal, I didn't even think that any of that was real. So I didn't know what was going on with all this lights around people, knowing everyone's thoughts. And, one thing I can say is that from that experience is that there's so much fear inside of people and shame and guilt. And I just wish if I could share one message, it would be like, be a little gentler with your soul. You're doing the best that you can with what you have currently. And you don't know what you don't know until you know it into the future. So give yourself a break. Keep going, keep trying to do good, but be a little softer on your soul. Because some of us come in with really heavy burdens to carry. And, it's kind of like in a yoga class. There's some people who come in and they're very talented and they're able to put their foot behind their head, drop into a back bend and flip up into a handstand, no problem. But the person in the corner who could barely get a down dog and is shaking through a warrior one, that person's actually working harder. You know what I mean? So
right.
some of us come in with less gifts. And I feel like the gifted many times, it's like an easy life for them because they're baby souls or it's a resting life for them. But some of us come in and we're like, give it to me. Like the alcoholic parents,
Right.
the abuse, the abandonment, the lack of this, the lack of that, you know, because I want that experience. My soul is ready. It's like a warrior soul. So after 2 weeks, I remember I was like, I need to come back into real life. I have two children. They need a mother. I can't just live in the dark room. So I started venturing out. And I learned how to kind of close that door first of all, I didn't touch people for a long time, but I also learned how to close that door where I wouldn't. It felt to me like knowing people's thoughts and their feelings was like a little bit too intrusive. Like you should get permission. Like I
Right.
don't really want to know that. So I recognized that I was able to shut that down, which is what I did because I was like, that's not really my life path. That's not what I want to do. I didn't want to be like a medium or a psychic. And I didn't want to know everybody's fear and sorrow and joy. And I just didn't want to
Mm.
know. So I went to see my cousin who took the brunt of the accident and got the worst injuries. She had 90% brain damage.
Oh, wow.
She broke every bone in her face, including her eye sockets. So I went to see her about 2 weeks after she was still in the recovery hospital. And I walked in, her mother was there, a nurse was there, and a doctor was there. And I remember seeing Carmen, and she was this beautiful Latin woman with these like doe eyes and soft skin. And the woman I saw laying in the bed did not resemble her at all. But she was broken, her eye sockets. She had rubber bands on her teeth, and she just didn't look like Carmen. And she was in a coma. And I remember I was afraid. Like it scared me to see her like that. And so I said, Crystal, this is your cousin Carmen, and you love her. So I kind of took a breath, and I went over and I just put my hands on her feet. And when I did, she opened her eyes, which freaked everybody out, as you can imagine, right?
Right.
And she sat up, and she was in a coma, right? And she insisted on getting up, and she wobbled over to me and she said, Crystal, I'm in the light. I've never been so radiant. I'm gleaming. I'm a star.
Oh, wow.
So this, remember, Melissa, I told you at the very beginning that I had asked God to prove to me he was real, not after I died, but before. And I was shown that we were no empty space in the universe, that punctuated light with stars, and that's what we are. So this was 30 years later, and I was reaffirming that we are energetic beings made of stars, basically. And I knew exactly what she was saying. And I remember her mother saying, brain damage, brain damage. And
Oh,
so then she went back and she laid back in bed and went back into coma. So subsequently, I came back to see her. And her mom is very Catholic, and she was not happy about me being there. She thought I was like doing some kind of exorcism or
oh
something.
no.
So her mom was like very mad every time I came in. So I came in again and I touched Carmen again, and she woke up out of her coma again. And this time she told me, remember in your book to include that sound and light is the future of medicine. And then phew, she went back to sleep. And I was like, okay. And then after that, her mother uninvited me to visit.
Oh no.
I know I was uninvited. And I understand. Like, it's just a different philosophy. She was scared. I'm not judging her. So I lost contact with Carmen for many, many years, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 years. Of recent, we reconnected. And just to fill in the gaps, the story of Carmen, she also had her own miraculous recovery. She was supposed to be an invalid for the rest of her life. She had a total recovery. She had a super high IQ anyway. But the only thing that she couldn't remember was 10 years being married to two alcoholic husbands. She couldn't remember that at all. What a gift. Her musical abilities were enhanced. She became the lead clarinetist for the Dallas Opera. And she met the love of her life, even though her face wasn't quite as beautiful. They did a good job on her surgery. She met the love of her life, who's also a music aficionado, and got married, has her own like real estate company, and they're happily married and so on and so forth. So Carmen's story turned out fine for her. And we reconnected, which is nice because when I was ready to write the book, I couldn't remember the dates. I'm really bad with time after this experience. Like, time doesn't really exist for me. Like, a week and a year seems like the same to me. I'm not good with time management. I'm not good with orienting myself in space. These are just sort of effects that happen from the near death experience, which is okay. I mean, it's fine. It gives me a different perspective on life. I always feel like I'm kind of seeing through the lens of the mortal me and the immortal me as well. So I'm seeing through two lenses at the same time. So that's what happened. Subsequent to that, I started writing a book, which I had to do a lot of healing on my own soul before I could, with any authority, talk about love, which was such a great gift to me to be able to share the message of unconditional love. So my life changed concerning the idea of love when I read a small book called Who Am I by Ramana Maharishi.
Yes. Yes.
And in that book, he one of the disciples asked him, Master, what is love? And I had been asking this question to everyone, to my own self, like, what is love? Like, and he said, love is the pure light of undifferentiated consciousness. And the minute I heard that sentence, I knew I had found my answer to what is love. So if we unravel that, pure light, meaning that it's pure energy, stars, all right? Undifferentiated means no opposites. Everything is burned in the fire of love. And it's aware, conscious. That's what love is. So it takes out, the whole romantic ideal of love to a broader expanse where, yes, romantic. So for me, the romantic ideal of love is called intimacy, right? So, for example, my children have a different relationship to me than the child on the street just because they're in closer proximity and they're closer into my world, into my intimacy, right, with me. But the love that I feel for my children from this universal sense is the same as the love that I feel for the child on the street. It's just that there's a different proximity. So, and some of our soulmates, and I think everyone that you pass and meet on the sacred journey of your life is your soulmate. But some are more intimate because they're closer into proximity of and have a bigger impact on you. But, somebody like, for example, I remember I was in the gym one day and I was newly divorced. And there's this woman came up to me who I really didn't know her very well. And she came up to me and she was like, "Hi, Crystal, how are you?" And I actually thought about it. And this is pre near death experience. And like, "Oh, how am I?" "Well, how would you like to know? I'm getting divorced. I have two small children. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm scared. I'm lonely." And I was just like bawling in the middle of the gym. And she understandably kind of like took a step back, you know. She was like, "Okay." But then she did something miraculous. She took a step towards me and she said, "Divine order is always at work in your life, and all is well, even when it seems that it's not." And this one sentence changed my life. And so I feel like this is so many years ago, right? She's like one of my most important soulmates. And I kept looking for her, Melissa, after that to thank her because she took me to the bathroom. She dried my tears. She gave me a very needed hug. And I remember I went home and I wrote it on my bathroom mirror with like lipstick. Divine order goes at work in your life. Like it became a mantra for me. It was so healing for my soul. And so you think about this, like this woman has no idea that she changed my life just by being kind and sharing a little piece of her heart with me. And so I believe that everyone we pass and meet, and even those that agitate us, like those people who really hurt us, when you think about the person that's hurt you the most, and I think we all can immediately go there, right? Whether it's a parent, a spouse, a teacher, friend, whatever it is. And think about the growth that happened as a result of that and how it forced you to go deeper. It forced you to question, life itself and your point of existence within it and how you wanted to live your life. And, whatever it did, like if we took that one thing out of your life, that one person, you'd be a totally different person and probably not as nice because that made you have to dig and get deeper. So, and I was shown that, many of our most important soulmates are agitators. The one that says, "All right, I'll be the bad guy. I love you so much. I'll break your heart. I'll be the one to hurt you. I'll be the one." And I'm not excusing bad behavior, by the way. I'm not saying it's okay that someone is hurt or someone, is affected by somebody else. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that on another level, on a different level, the possibility exists that they are there for a divine reason and they signed up for it. I give an example in my book of the drunken old man on the street. Many people drive by him and with disgust, like he's got the tracks on his arm and the bottle in his hand and he's soiled and dirty and, they think, what a loser or whatever. But if we saw that same man in his most radiant version of self, like outside this body, we would see him choosing to come into this life to a mother that's addicted to meth, to a father that abused him, to circumstances, maybe a low IQ because of all this drug addiction and the inability to make decisions. He signed up for that. And that's a hard, really hard life. And he signed up for that because one person was going to drive by and see him and put their bottle down. And that's that's an avatar, that to take on such suffering, a whole life of suffering to save one person. So this idea that, judging people, and then you could have the opposite of that, somebody who's very, always giving money to the poor, putting their name on this and that, but they have no kindness within them. They're doing it to aggrandize themselves, but they're really very shallow and empty person, which we've all seen that too. It's a baby soul, that we don't want to judge that as bad, but basically they've been given everything and they haven't given it back. Because I think to those that much is given, much is required. Like we are required to give back. So this whole near-death experience, like it was really poignant in my personal journey because I know absolutely, without a doubt, this is not it. There's so much more. And on top of that, I know that love is all that matters. And there's no judgment put upon the soul except for that which we bring upon ourselves. And that each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence, even including the dark night of the soul, and the hardship is part of our joy and our bliss. And there is a perfection to the imperfection. Granted, there's something so horrific and so terrifying and so vile that we can't reconcile with the human mind how that's even possible. I still can't, even from this perspective, when I see such horror and pain and suffering and things that happen to others. But I also know that there is a part of me that knows the answer to that, that I'm veiled from that truth so that I can have this human experience. And and whatever I can do to make the world a better place is what I get to do. You know what I mean? Like each one of us in our own world, rather than looking out and saying, this shouldn't be like that and that shouldn't be like that. How about let's make the world a better place by being a better person, like right in our own world, right within our own lives, and stop waiting for others to change and be that change, as Gandhi says, that we want to see in the world, and not expect anything from anyone because that would be a business deal. And this is not about a business deal. This is about really living from this place of abundance and love. And so that's what I don't always, I'm not always able to do it. I'm just going to say that's a hard path, right? But I always say I'll get a big E for effort. I always try. And I think that's all we can ever do. And I also have this belief that every decision that you make in your life is the highest decision possible within that particular circumstance. And the proof is that you didn't make a better one until you do in the future. And you can only do what you can do in that moment, even though better options were available. If you don't take them, then you weren't able to take them. And that really has to do with energy resonance. So to really make better choices, you have to lift your energy. Otherwise, it'd be too bright. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to carry that light. So we can only make what we can, and there's no way to like, leapfrog forward. We have to just keep making this little changes over time. Granted, there may be some experiences that are so profound, like a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, that you definitely are leapfrogging forward. But that's more of a soul mission, like life path that's happening for you, not really within your control. For example, falling off the counter, like what should have happened is I should have hit the floor. But by divine forces, whatever happened there, I have no idea. I landed like a cat on my feet. It's like, that's one of my 9 lives right there. So it is my joy, though, to share the message of unconditional love, to remind people that life is beautiful, even the dark nights of the soul, part of your joy, part of your beauty, and that you only have today. Like we don't have, yesterday's dead, tomorrow is a dream. All we have is today, and all we have is now, truthfully. So, yes, plan for the future, but be here now. Like nothing makes me sadder than watching people work away their life so that they'll be happy in the future, or working the whole year hoping for vacation, like, wait, this is your life. Like, open your eyes, smell the freshly cut grass, see the sunshine, reach out and embrace someone who needs a hug. We all need a hug, by the way. Everyone does. And be alive. I mean, it's not about being at the beach to be happy or getting the girl or the job or the this or the that. That's all nice. But everything within 3 months has diminishing returns. Like even if you win the lottery, according to science, you'll come back to your emotional set point in 3 months. Equally, if you were to lose your limbs, all 4 limbs, in 3 months, you'll come back to your equilibrium. So regardless of great things or horrific things, we come back to who we really are within 3 months, because that's our soul mission, is to elevate the energy of our beingness through our personal volition. We're not automaton little beings that are forced to do anything. We have freedom. That's like the greatest gift, is to be free to choose. And I guess if I could share a message, like the most important thing you can do is to recognize how the little decisions you make change the rest of your life. And you only have 2 choices, and that's either to love or to fear. So when you can be cruel, be kind. When you could hurt, help. When you could abandon, support. Like do the opposite of what most people do. And it's hard because sometimes that's what we want to do. Our fear response is to abandon, or to hurt. Someone says something mean, it's easy to slice back and snap back. It requires a lot of fortitude to react differently. One last story I'll share with you because I think it's so beautiful, and then I'll have to let you go because I know we could talk forever. But there's this woman who was a saint in India, and a mass murderer who he thought that the most beautiful thing to do would be to kill a saint, and he'd killed so many people. And this is a true story, by the way. So she was in her little, what do they call it, rickshaws, those little carts, and this mass murderer got into the rickshaw with her, and he put a knife at her neck. And she very calmly just looked at him and said, "If you must do it, don't suffer." And in that moment, he became her disciple because she had no fear of death, because she knew that if she had anger towards him, she created another ripple in the matrix that had to come into completion. In other words, she connected himself to him. And so in her forgiveness of him, knowing that we will all die, we just don't know when, she's like, "If you must do it, please don't suffer." And I think this is such an important message that, we can't expect anyone to be something that they're not. Like a dog is going to bark, a cat is going to meow, a person is going to be who they are. We get to decide how we are going to receive our lives. And, I think once we make peace with our own death, inevitable death, right? When we make peace with that, then we are truly liberated. My reaction in the car, everyone's screaming, everyone's horrified. I'm like, oh, okay, welcome. Today is death day. I had no idea. And I was completely okay. I mean, there was some sorrow, not about the death, but about not being alive. And that's still the thing that I really strive for, is in every day, to truly be alive, to truly keep working on my soul, keep seeing the sunrise, keep smelling the freshly cut grass, helping others when I can. Nothing brings me more joy, truthfully, than teaching. Like if people say, "What brings you joy?" It's not like going on vacation or getting a new something or other. It's like when I feel like my life has purpose and meaning because I'm helping others to help themselves, by the way. I think no one's coming to save you. And that's a good thing. You get to save yourself. Yes, there'll be teachers that show you the way, that illuminate the way, but you have to and you get to save yourself. Because if I save you, then you're indebted to me. And if I disappear, then you lose your way. But if I help you to find your own light, find your own way, whether I'm there or not, you are okay. And that's what we get to do for each other. And I'm so grateful, for example, to the lady in the gym who took the moment to empower me by saying divine order is always at work in your life and all is well. She didn't save me. She gave me an opportunity to heal my own self, to take this particular direction that maybe I wouldn't have taken had she not. And it's just very funny because had I not answered truthfully, because what do we usually say when someone says, "How are you?" We say, "I'm fine, fine, fine." But this particular day, I said, "Would you really like to know how I am? Let me tell you." So the point of that is that you have to be truthful. Mm. You have to really tell the truth and notice when you're moving on this rote behavior and and just love yourself, love others, know that you're loved, be joyful. Yeah, tears are going to come, but let them come. Sorrow is going to come. You will have loss if you live long enough. You will have betrayal. You will betray. It'll happen. Oh,
yeah. Well, Crystal, thank you so very much for sharing your story and your wisdom. I've so enjoyed learning not only about your experiences, but maybe more importantly, from the wisdom that you've brought back from them. I would like to give you a chance to share with people where they can find you. If you could briefly share about what you do and where people can connect with you.
Oh, love that. So the easiest way to connect with me is to go to my website, which is crystalraysoul.com. And there's a little page there where you can, and by the way, I have a seva, which means that something that I do just because I can. And I'm not a psychologist, I wanted to say that, but I do a lot of healing work and soul work with people. So you can connect with me there and make an appointment. I don't really charge for this, and I will only give you 30 minutes of my time, but it's something I do because I love to. So, and it's really been a joy for me to help others. So you can find me there. You can also find my book on Amazon, Love Letters to Your Soul, which is just completed. I also did the audio book, which I'm really excited about because the audio book is I'm the narrator, and I feel like there's a healing resonance to the voice. So I think it's very healing to listen to this book. And this book that I wrote, Melissa, is a book I could never find. So it's a book when you just need a hug, or you need some wisdom, you need some guidance, and in the direction of unconditional love. And so this is the book that I was directed to write. And it's very poetic, but very pragmatic. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful read. Yeah, so that's the easiest way to find me.
Thank you so much for watching. My guests' links can be found in the description box. If you have had a near-death experience, pre-birth experience, out-of-body experience, past or between life memories, or spiritual awakening story that you would like to share, find the link to apply in the description box. If you would like to support the channel, we have a few fun ways that you can do that. I do have a merch store linked in the description. We've put some of the phrases on t-shirts that you guys requested. I have affiliate links to my favorite blue blockers, my favorite red light panel, and a couple of other companies that I work with. You can join my membership, The Sanctuary. You can sign up for an energy healing. I also offer a 4-session energy healing package. You'll find all these links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.